The air in the press room was thick with that post-game electricity, the kind you only feel after a dominant 56-22 blowout. Fernando Mendoza sat there, the Heisman Trophy winner with sweat still drying on his jersey, having just dismantled one of the best defenses in the country. Reporters were leaning in, recorders poised for the usual cliches about giving 110% or taking it one game at a time. They wanted to hear about the 5 touchdowns or the thrill of the victory march toward the national championship, but then Mendoza did something that made the room go quiet. He didn't talk about his arm talent or the momentum of the Indiana offense. Instead, with a calm that seemed almost eerie for a 22-year-old in the biggest moment of his life, he began explaining the finer points of ancient stoicism. He spoke about delayed gratification, not as a buzzword, but as a survival mechanism. He looked less like a quarterback coming off a high-stakes win and more like a monk who happened to be wearing a helmet. It was a striking contradiction. Here was a young man at the literal peak of external validation fame, trophies, and a ticket to the pros, arguing that none of it mattered as much as the discipline of waiting. He talked about voluntary discomfort while sitting in the glow of a multi-million-dollar spotlight. That sudden shift from the high-octane violence of the field to the quiet, cold logic of a philosopher left me wondering, what does a star athlete know about the marshmallow test that the rest of us have forgotten? It made me realize that his performance on the field wasn't just about athletic prowess. It was the result of a psychological trade-off most people are too impatient to ever make. We're all sitting in a room with a single marshmallow right now, whether it's in our careers, our health, or our bank accounts, and the way we react to that sweetness in the moment might be the only thing standing between a mediocre life and a championship one.
It really is a profound moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have this gladiator essentially pausing his own celebration to lecture the press corps on the virtues of suffering.
Right. Cinematic.
It is cinematic. But, and I hate to be the buzzkill here right at the top, when we see someone like Mendoza, we immediately default to this great man theory of psychology.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we think, wow, he has such incredible character. He is morally superior to the guy who eats the donut. We frame delayed gratification as a virtue, like a spiritual muscle that you either have or you don't.
Are you saying it's not? Because, I mean, I look at my own life, the gym sessions I skip, the impulse purchases on Amazon at 2 in the morning. Right. And it certainly feels like a moral failing to me. It feels like I'm just not strong enough to be Mendoza.
And it is exactly the trap. If we look at the stack of research we've gathered for this deep dive, that binary view, the saint versus the sinner, completely disintegrates. We need to stop looking at Mendoza as a philosopher king and start looking at him as a biological organism that has successfully hacked its own evolutionary programming.
Hacked its own programming. That sounds a lot less romantic.
Oh, it is much less romantic, but it is infinitely more useful for you, the listener. We aren't just looking at philosophy books today. We have a stack of data here that is frankly intimidating. We have academic papers on chimpanzee patients. We have fMRI studies where they are literally using magnetic pulses on people's brains to shut down their self-control centers. And we have cross-cultural experiments from Japan and the US.
It's a massive scope.
We are going to strip this entire concept down to the studs. We are looking at delayed gratification, not as a virtue, but as a machine.
A machine that can break.
Exactly. Or, more accurately, a machine that was never actually designed for the world we live in today. We need to go from the evolutionary pressures on the savannah that forged our brains, right up to the modern economic cues that hack them.
Okay, so if we are stripping this down, we have to start at the absolute beginning, before there were quarterbacks and before there were marshmallows.
But
So in preparing for this, I was exploring the evolutionary psychology of delayed gratification. I was really examining how natural selection may have shaped this adaptive mechanism in humans and the environmental conditions that influence its expression and trade-offs in modern contexts. It challenged the way I think about our place in the animal kingdom. Because we tell ourselves this story that humans are the pinnacle of evolution specifically because we can wait. We plant crops, we build cities, we save for retirement, and animals just react. The dog sees the steak, the dog eats the steak.
that right there is what biologists call the phylogenetic gap myth.
The phylogenetic gap.
Yeah, it's the standard cocktail party fact. Humans have the prefrontal cortex, humans have patience, animals have instincts, animals have impulses.
It makes us feel good.
Exactly, it makes us feel civilized. But there is a study in our stack by Rosati, Stevens, Hare, and Hauser that takes a sledgehammer to that entire ego trip.
Oh, this is the one with the chimpanzees and bonobos.
And I want you to really visualize this setup. You have a human, a rational, modern human, and you have a chimpanzee.
Okay, I'm picturing.
You offer them a choice. You can have a small bit of food right now, immediately. Or if you wait 2 minutes, you can have a much larger portion. It's a classic trade-off.
And the assumption is the human waits and the chimp just grabs the snack.
That is the assumption. But the data shows the exact opposite.
Really?
Yes. In this specific context, waiting for food rewards, chimpanzees and bonobos actually exhibited a degree of patience that effectively rivaled and in some metrics actually exceeded the humans. The humans were significantly more likely to get frustrated, to discount the future value, and to just take the small reward so they could get on with their day.
You're telling me that if I'm sitting next to a chimp and we're both hungry, the chimp has better self-control than I do?
In that scenario, yes.
Wrong. We built the pyramids. They throw. You know what they throw.
It feels wrong because you are conflating intelligence with patience. But let's look at the variables. The study highlights a crucial distinction. Humans are incredibly patient when it comes to abstract rewards.
Abstract rewards, like money.
Exactly. We will wait decades for a retirement fund. We will wait 4 years for a college degree. We will wait for a promotion. But when it comes to primary rewards, biological necessities like food, our patience collapses. The chimp, however, is an absolute expert at the food game.
So, why is my brain a fortress when it comes to my 401k, but an absolute sieve when it comes to pizza?
It comes down to what researchers call the foraging brain. This is a concept explored deeply by Benjamin Hayden. You have to step out of the studio and into the environment where your brain actually evolved.
The savannah.
The savannah. For millions of years, food was highly perishable. There was no refrigeration. There was no Tupperware.
Hey, if you kill a gazelle, it's going to rot in a day or two.
It rots. But there is something even more pressing than rot. Hayden talks about interruption risk and collection risk.
What are those?
Imagine you are on the savannah. You see a fruit tree, but the fruit isn't quite ripe yet. You decide to wait 3 hours for it to ripen perfectly. A baboon comes along and eats it, or a leopard comes along and eats meat.
Exactly. The environment was highly volatile. If you decide to wait for a better food source later, the statistical probability of you actually getting that food drops precipitously with every passing minute.
Because something else will take it.
Right. So in that context, grabbing the food now isn't impulsive. It isn't a lack of discipline. It is ecologically rational.
So the phrase, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, that isn't just a folk saying. It's a survival algorithm. It is the dominant survival algorithm for biological organisms. Evolution didn't select for the creature that sat around meditating on the virtue of patience while its caloric sources disappeared.
That guy starved.
That guy starved. Evolution selected for the creature that took the calories available to fuel the machine immediately. So when you were standing in your kitchen at midnight staring at that donut, you aren't fighting a moral weakness.
What am I fighting?
You are fighting a system that has been refined over eons to scream, eat this now, because tomorrow is not guaranteed.
But if that's the case, why do we have any self-control at all? Why aren't we just consumption machines 24/7? If the eat now algorithm is so incredibly strong, how did we ever manage to save seeds for the next harvest?
That is the cost of control question. Hayden asks a brilliant question. Why didn't evolution select for perfect self-control? Why aren't we like rocks?
Rocks.
A rock is infinitely patient. It never gets bored. It never gets hungry.
A rock also doesn't reproduce.
Correct. But living things have metabolic costs. The human brain is an absolute energy hog. It weighs about 3 pounds, but consumes 20% of your body's energy.
That's a huge overhead.
So to save energy, the brain relies on automatization. It creates shortcuts. Seafood, eat food is a cheap, fast, automated computation. It costs almost zero glucose to execute.
Okay, and self-control.
Using self-control, overriding that automated signal to wait for a better abstract future is an expensive, high-energy intervention.
So being impulsive is basically the brain's power-saving mode.
Yes. Poor self-control is often just a well-learned or automated strategy that worked perfectly on the savannah, but is deeply maladaptive in a modern supermarket.
Because the supermarket isn't going anywhere.
Right. We have these specialized systems for food ancient, impulsive, automated, and then we have these general systems for abstract concepts like money or the Heisman Trophy, modern, slower, patient.
That makes total sense. The chimp is better at waiting for food because for the chimp, food is the whole game. For us, food is just one part of a complex, abstract life.
Exactly.
But this brings us right back to Mendoza. When he talks about Stoicism, he isn't just reciting quotes. He's essentially using that general modern system, the abstract reasoning, to override the ancient automated one.
Yes.
He's literally burning energy to fight his own biology.
He is manually engaging the override switch. And that is exhausting. That is why he talks about discomfort. It is not just physical discomfort from football, it is cognitive load. He is forcing his brain to burn energy to bypass the default setting.
Manually engaging the override switch. That's a great image, but it's also kind of terrifying.
Why is that terrifying?
Because switches can fail. And if this is a biological mechanism, it means it's physical. It's not just willpower floating in the ether, it's wetware.
It is absolutely wetware.
I really want to dig into that wetware because I was investigating the neurocognitive mechanisms underlying delayed gratification. I was looking into the interplay between prefrontal cortex function, reward pathways, and emotional regulation, and how these biological processes contribute to individual differences in self-control.
It's the engine room of the whole operation.
Exactly. And I came across this fascinating account from a student who participated in a high-stakes neurocognitive trial. She described the experience as a literal physical pressure behind her eyes.
Description.
She called it the sensation of her prefrontal cortex engaging in a high-speed collision with her brain's reward centers. Every time a distraction flashed on her screen, promising a quick hit of dopamine, she had to manually brake her impulses.
She felt the friction.
Yes. It wasn't a moral choice for her, it was a structural battle. And thinking about this, it completely changes how I view willpower. We often judge people who struggle with self-control as having a character flaw, but I've come to realize we're looking at a biological symphony that some people simply have better conductors for. As someone who spends all day in the modern attention economy, I find this slightly terrifying. We are asking our brains to perform stoic feats of restraint in an era designed by brilliant engineers to break that very restraint. I feel for those who feel they are failing at life because they can't focus. Sometimes it's not a lack of virtue, but a brain being overwhelmed by a world it wasn't built to navigate.
That physical pressure she described, that sensation of the break, that is not a metaphor. That is the biological reality of what is happening in the lateral prefrontal cortex, or LPFC.
The LPFC.
Right. We know this definitively because of an incredible study by Fingner and his colleagues. They used something called RTMS, repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation.
There, RTMSO sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. What are they actually doing to these people?
It's fascinating and honestly a little bit spooky. They take a magnetic coil and place it directly against the participant's skull.
Like a magnet you'd put on a fridge.
A very, very powerful one. This coil creates a focused magnetic field that penetrates the skull and essentially scrambles the electrical firing of neurons in a very specific, tiny region of the brain.
Wait, they scramble the brain?
It's like jamming a radio signal. They aren't damaging the brain permanently, but they are temporarily knocking that specific area offline. It creates what neuroscientists call a virtual lesion.
So they can just turn off parts of your personality on demand?
They can turn off specific processing functions. In this study, they offered participants choices: a smaller amount of money now or a larger amount later. The standard choice we all face. Do you want $20 now or $40 in 2 weeks?
Easy choice. I take the $40.
Most rational people do. But then the researchers applied the magnetic pulses to the left LPFC. They jammed the signal. When they disrupted the left LPFC, people became significantly more likely to choose the immediate reward. They grabbed the $20.
So did the magnet make them greedier? Did it change how much they liked money?
Question. Did it change the valuation? Did they suddenly think $20 was worth $1 million?
Yes, they.
No. They ran a control task to see if the participants' valuation of the money changed. It hadn't. Their valuation remained exactly the same.
Meaning they still knew the $40 was better.
Exactly. They knew the future money was a better deal. They knew they should wait. But without the LPFC functioning, they literally couldn't stop themselves from choosing the now option.
It is horrifying. Truly, it means you can know the right thing to do. You can value the right thing. You can sit there and say, I want to be healthy or I want to save money. But if the brakes are cut, you crash the car anyway.
You crash the car every time.
It perfectly validates what that student felt. It's not just, I should be better. It's my brakes are overheating.
Exactly. This proves that self-control is an active intervention. It is a braking system. The desire signal comes from the reward centers deep in the brain, the amygdala, the striatum. That signal is always on. I want. I need. Give me.
Relentless.
If the LPFC is online, it can stomp on the brakes and say, hold on, the future value is higher. If the LPFC is offline, either because of magnets in a lab, or real-world stress, or exhaustion, or alcohol, the car just goes.
This explains so much about decisions under fatigue. You know, after a long day of work, I know I shouldn't order the greasy takeout. I highly value my health, but my LPFC is just exhausted. It's out of juice. And the I want signal wins.
And to extend that conductor analogy you mentioned earlier, we have to look at the Caltech study by Hare, Kemmerer, and Rangel regarding dieters. This is one of my favorites because it maps this exact dynamic onto real-world health choices, which is something basically everyone struggles with.
This was the self-controllers versus the non-self-controllers study, right?
They found people who were actively dieting. They put them in an fMRI scanner, so they're literally watching the blood flow in the brain in real time and show them pictures of food.
Sounds like torture for a dieter.
It was a control challenge. They had to rate the foods on 2 scales, taste and health. Then they had to make actual choices about what to eat.
Okay, so I assume everyone likes the tasty stuff, but the good dieters pick the healthy stuff.
It is much more mechanical than that. In the brains of the non-self-controllers, the people who generally failed their diets, the decision-making center, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, or VMPFC, only lit up in response to the taste rating.
Wait, only taste?
It was like the health signal didn't even exist for them. Their brain was asking one single question: is this yummy?
So they were looking at a salad and their brain was just silent.
Yes. They looked at a candy bar and the VMPFC lit up like a Christmas tree because it was tasty. They looked at broccoli and nothing. The health data was there. They intellectually knew it was healthy, but that information wasn't being integrated into the value calculation.
It's in the self-controllers, the Mendozas of the diet world.
Their brains looked fundamentally different. Their VMPFC processed the taste signal. They still like the candy bar. They're human. But it also processed the health signal. Here is the key. They have massive activity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the DLPFC. That is the conductor we talked about. The DLPFC was communicating with the VMPFC, essentially modulating the value signal.
So the DLPFC is the voice in your head screaming, it's healthy, it's good for you.
Exactly. It shouts loud enough to drown out the it's yummy signal.
Mm-hmm.
For the successful dieters, the health information was integrated into the final value. It became part of the math. For the unsuccessful ones, the conductor was asleep. The health information never got integrated.
So when Mendoza is sitting there in that press conference talking about voluntary discomfort, what he's really doing is training his DLPFC. He's rehearsing the connection.
He is strengthening the physical connectivity. He is making sure that when the hot signal comes in from the reward centers, his conductor is awake, holding the baton, and ready to modulate that signal. He is building a neural infrastructure that allows the health or legacy or championship signal to be heard over the immediate noise of comfort.
That completely reframes the entire idea of a strong will. It's not a magical soul force, it's signal strength, it's bandwidth, it's wiring.
And bandwidth can be disrupted, which leads us to the environment. Because you can have a great conductor, but if the concert hall is on fire, or if the audience is screaming, or if the instruments are broken, the music stops.
That's the perfect bridge, because we often talk about this like it happens in a vacuum, just a brain in a jar, making choices, just have more willpower. But we don't live in jars. We live in economies and families and neighborhoods.
And the environment sets the difficulty level for that DLPFC.
I want to bring in a different perspective here, actually, because I was analyzing the cross-cultural variations in the development and societal value of delayed gratification. I was looking into how different socioeconomic structures, cultural narratives, and educational systems impact an individual's capacity and propensity for long-term planning and impulse control.
It's a huge piece of the puzzle.
I came across a specific narrative about a young woman from a volatile socioeconomic background who found her way into a prestigious university through a scholarship. For her, the marshmallow test wasn't a game, it was a risk assessment. Right. In her neighborhood, if you didn't take the first marshmallow, someone else would steal it before the second one ever arrived. Her impulsiveness was actually a highly rational survival strategy. But then she began reading Marcus Aurelius, and it shifted her entire worldview. She started to see that while she couldn't control the instability of her physical environment, she could own the sovereignty of her own mind. She realized that delayed gratification wasn't just about getting a bigger reward, it was about the freedom of not being a slave to her circumstances. I've thought about her story a lot. It's easy to preach stoicism and long-term planning from a place of security, but seeing someone use it as a tool to claw their way out of uncertainty is powerful. It reminds me that self-control is a cultural narrative as much as a personal one. We have to be incredibly careful not to judge the impatience of those whose lives have taught them that the future is never guaranteed. Her journey shows that while the system might be broken, the individual's choice to wait can be the ultimate act of defiance.
That story cuts to the absolute core of the issue. It perfectly encapsulates the research we have on poverty cues.
Poverty cues.
Yes, we have a brilliant study here by Liu and colleagues that looked exactly at this dynamic. And they found something that really shakes up the traditional willpower narrative. They didn't just look at rich people versus poor people. They looked at the priming effect of the environment itself.
What do you mean by priming?
They showed participants images right before asking them to make financial decisions. One group saw affluence cues, fancy dining rooms, nice cars, organized, clean spaces. The other group saw poverty cues, dilapidated buildings, messy rooms, chaotic environments.
So just looking at a picture, they didn't actually take their money away or put them in poverty.
Just looking at a picture for a few moments, and the result was drastic. Merely seeing the poverty cues induced a preference for immediate gratification. People who saw the messy room were far more likely to take the money now rather than wait for a larger sum later.
Why? Is it hopelessness? Is it a feeling of, the world is ugly, so I might as well buy a treat?
No, it is adaptation. It goes right back to our foraging brain on the savannah. In a resource-deprived environment, or a chaotic one, the future is structurally uncertain.
Right.
If you are in a chaotic environment, waiting is a mathematically bad bet. If you leave your food on the table in a chaotic house, it might disappear. So the rational choice in a stable environment, which is to wait for more, becomes the foolish choice in an unstable environment.
So live for the present isn't a moral failing. It isn't a lack of discipline. It's a survival setting. It's the brain switching to crisis mode.
Correct. Your brain looks at the messy room and says, resources are scarce. Order is breaking down. Secure the asset right now. Smart.
This forces us to revisit the famous marshmallow test. We have all heard the story. The kid who waits gets better SAT scores and a better life. The kid who eats it is doomed. We've built entire educational philosophies on this one test.
And we built them on shaky ground. The replication study by Watts and colleagues blew a hole in that simple narrative.
This is the nuance we missed for decades. What did Watts actually find?
When Watts replicated the study with a much larger and more diverse sample, they controlled for family background and home environment. And suddenly, the correlation between waiting and lifelong success diminished significantly. It didn't disappear entirely, but it shrank massively.
Because the kid from the unstable home isn't
Weak. They just don't trust the researcher.
It is a matter of rational trust.
Put yourself in the shoes of a 4-year-old. If you come from a stable home where the fridge is always full and your parents always keep their promises, trusting the researcher in the white coat to bring a second marshmallow is easy. It is a very low-risk bet. You have data that says waiting pays off.
But if I come from a home where the electricity gets cut off, or where mom says, we'll go to the park later, but we never go,
then eating the marshmallow now is the only way to guarantee a win. The child grabbing the marshmallow is making a data-driven decision based on their life experience. They are being rational actors in an irrational world.
It makes me think about the cultural layer, too. It's not just economics, it's habit, it's ritual. We have this study, Cultures Crossing, that compared Japanese and American kids. This one really surprised me.
This one is fascinating because it separates biology from ritual. They tested how long kids would wait for food versus how long they would wait for gifts.
And there was a split.
Japanese children waited significantly longer for food than American children. But American children waited longer for gifts than Japanese children.
Oh, so they both have self-control, just for entirely different things. That basically kills the idea that self-control is just one big generic muscle.
It suggests that self-control is deeply contextual. In Japan, there is a strong cultural ritual of waiting to eat until everyone is served. They say itadakimasu. They practice food waiting every single day. It is a muscular habit. The environment reinforces it constantly.
And in the U.S.?
Food is often grab and go. We eat in the car, we eat standing up at the kitchen counter, but we have intense rituals around waiting for birthdays and Christmas to open gifts. The wrapped box, sitting under the tree for 2 weeks, is a torture device that American kids are explicitly trained to endure.
So we can essentially outsource self-control to our culture. We don't have to use our own LPFC brakes if the culture applies the brakes for us.
Delayed gratification is often a habit supported by rituals. If you have a ritual that says, we wait, the brain doesn't have to use as much energy to brake. The environment does the heavy lifting for you.
This connects everything back to Mendoza. He's in a high-performance culture. College football is basically a giant machine for manufacturing delayed gratification. The workouts, the film study, the diet. He has rituals that support the discipline. He doesn't have to decide every morning, should I work out? The ritual decides for him.
But he takes it a step further. He internalizes it. And that is where we get to the Stoic synthesis. Because you can have the rituals and you can have the biology, but you still need a philosophy to run the software.
So let's bring it home. We have seen the biological break, the LPFC, and how it can be magnetically disrupted. We have seen the evolutionary drive, the foraging brain that wants calories now. We have seen how poverty and culture tune the dials. Now let's look at the philosophy again, because when we merge science and philosophy, something really cool happens.
We realize that what the Stoics called prohairesis reasoned choice is essentially the user interface for the LPFC and DLPFC.
Yeah.
It's the conscious, deliberate application of that biological machinery.
There's a quote from Seneca in our sources that really threw me for a loop. She says, "Putting things off is the greatest waste of life." When I first read that, I thought, wait, isn't that the opposite of delayed gratification? Isn't he saying, carpe diem, grab the marshmallow?
Sounds like it. But Seneca is subtle. He is talking about the crucial difference between waiting and procrastinating. He means we shouldn't waste the present moment by anxiously waiting for the future to begin. He is attacking the anxiety of postponement, the idea that I'll be happy when I get the promotion. If you live like that, you never live. You are always just waiting.
But he also says we shouldn't be enslaved by immediate impulse.
It is the Stoic paradox.
Okay.
True delayed gratification isn't about suffering. It isn't about staring at the marshmallow and sweating and hating your life. It is about sovereignty. It is about not being a slave to the hot system, the id, the impulse, and also not being a slave to the anxiety of the future.
So if I eat the marshmallow because I can't help it, I'm a slave to my biology. If I wait for the marshmallow because I'm terrified of the future, I'm a slave to my fear. But if I wait because I actively choose to wait, that's freedom.
That is the sweet spot. And Mendoza mentioned voluntary discomfort. Seneca used to sleep on a hard bed and eat stale bread for a few days a month. Not because he was poor, he was incredibly wealthy, one of the richest men in Rome, but to train himself.
He was literally doing reps for his DLPFC.
Literally doing reps. He was training his brain's networks so that when real scarcity hit or when a high-pressure situation arrived, his system wouldn't panic. He was telling his amygdala, we have been here before, we are fine, we don't need to freak out.
For the listener who isn't a Heisman winner or a Roman emperor, we are fighting millions of years of evolution. We are fighting an attention economy designed by geniuses to break our LTFC and sell us stuff. It feels like the deck is completely stacked against us.
It is stacked. But the science shows we have the capacity to change the circumstances. We can create environments where the future self feels real. We can build rituals, like the Japanese dinner table, that make waiting easier. And we can practice voluntary discomfort to strengthen the brakes. We can invite a little bit of cold into our lives so the winter doesn't shock us.
And there's one final thought from the source material that really stuck with me. It's about the ultimate form of delayed gratification, legacy.
Yes. This is where biology ends and philosophy takes over. Evolution explains why we wait for food or money. Those are resources for us. Evolution struggles to explain why we plant trees.
Planting trees whose shade you will never sit in.
That is the ultimate delay. Mentoring people whose achievements you won't see. Doing work that won't bear fruit until after you are gone.
It requires accepting that the reward isn't the dopamine hit. The reward isn't the sugar. The reward is the contribution itself. It transcends the biological timeline entirely.
And that, I think, is what a championship life actually looks like. It's not just winning the trophy, it's building something that outlasts the game.
That is the only way to beat the game. You don't play for the win, you play for the legacy. Fernando Mendoza might win the title, or he might not. But that mindset is undefeated. Legacy is the ultimate delay.